House will come back to order. House will come back to order. Mr. Clerk, you want to ring the bell so we can get going? The clerk will read the caption to a group of privileged resolutions.
Celebrating the birth of Ari Isaac K., recognizing and commending Skills USA for its outstanding contributions, honoring the life and memory of Frank Ross Sr., recognizing and commending Bishop Victor L. Powell on the occasion of his 30th anniversary leading Rima World Cathedral, recognizing and commending the Georgia Future Caucus, congratulating and commending Dr. Amber M. Simmons for receiving the 2020 Yellow Rose Nikki T. Randall Servant Leader Award, and for other purposes. That completes the reading of the privileged resolutions.
We're back on the rules calendar. The clerk will read the caption to House Bill 854.
House Bill 854 by Representative Rutledge, the 109th, being entitled an act to amend Chapter 60 and Title 36 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to the general provisions applicable to counties and municipal corporations so as defined battery charged offense. This bill having referred to the Committee on Governmental Affairs, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Representative Rutledge to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I bring to you for consideration HB 854. It addresses an issue occurring across the state regarding the newest technology in alarm detection systems that is using a battery-charged fence. What's happening are business owners such as construction companies, utility contractors, trucking companies, companies with equipment on the ground that needs to be protected. And what's happening is they're contacting their local permitting offices to install the battery-charged detection system, and since the system is not defined in code, it is creating a costly and lengthy delay in getting the system in place. Meanwhile, their property is being unprotected. So HB 854 simply defines the alarm detection technology in state code with all other alarm systems. It also further defines the system to be used only in commercial and industrial zone properties, and the system will not be allowed on properties that are residential or agriculture. This measure will streamline the process for local permitting offices by allowing them to treat the alarm detection system as any other alarm systems, and most importantly, the businesses choosing this type of system will be able to do this without delay. That's what the bill does, and I ask for your favorable consideration. Mr. Speaker, if there's any questions.
You have no questions.
Thank you.
You do have a question.
I'll
Do you yield?
I'll yield.
Chair recognizes Chairman McCall to your right for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Gentlemen, yield.
I will.
You and I talked the other day that this specifically exempts any kind of agricultural practice with electric fence, right?
Right. Cows will not touch this fence.
And in the original bill, it was kind of listed that way, and I didn't see it in this one.
Correct. We've excluded agriculture and residential properties.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mr. I'll yield the well.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of House Bill 854. The ayes are 153, the nays are 7. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 1084.
House Bill 1084 by Representative Chokas, the 138th, being entitled an act to amend Chapter 12 of Title 50 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated relating to commissions and other agencies, so as to provide for the creation of the Georgia Endowment for Teaching Professionals. This bill having referred to the Committee on Higher Education. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Representative Chokas to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I bring before you tonight House Bill 1084. This measure was recommended by the Rural Development Council. House Bill 1084 will create the Georgia Endowment for Teaching Professionals to assist the technical college system of Georgia. This endowment, through its trustees, will solicit funds privately through grants and donations for the purpose of recruiting and maintaining outstanding teaching professionals in high-demand disciplines. A few of these high-demand disciplines are diesel equipment technology, computer programming, computer technology, electrical line working, precision manufacturing, welding, and practical nursing. The lack of skilled workers in these disciplines has had a negative impact on Georgia's economy. The Rural Development Council realized that having a workforce with these skills will better enable rural Georgia to attract industry and improve the quality of life. I've placed on your desk a letter of support from the Metro Chamber. If there are no questions, I respectfully ask for your favorable consideration to House Bill 1084.
You have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield well.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the passage of House Bill 1084, the ayes are 158, the nays are 2. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 244.
House Bill 244 by Representative Stevens, the 164th, be entitled an act to amend Part 2 of Article 4, Chapter 3, Title 46, the Official Code of Georgia, annotated relating to corporate purposes and powers of electric membership corporations. This bill having been assigned to the Committee on Economic Development and Tourism. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Recognizes Chairman Ron Stevens to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, as you might know, the past couple of years, we've been doing our best to try to get broadband to the rest of Georgia, not just in Atlanta, Savannah, and the metro areas. This is a Hail Mary attempt, and believe it or not, we've got agreement from the EMC trade associations and with the providers. Governor said today that the coronavirus is forcing all metro Atlanta districts to move online. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you today that's not an option in some of Georgia. We got a chance today with an agreement to move forward with pole attachment rates. What this bill does essentially is none of the current contracts will be affected. None of them. They will continue on the way they are until they expire. At that point, the Public Service Commission, the folks that do this for a living right across the street, will make the decision without a floor and without a ceiling what that rate is going to be. However, they don't even have to stay with that. If they want to come up with their own agreement outside of the Public Service Commission, they can do that. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a last-ditch effort. Let's do not leave rural Georgia in the dark anymore when it comes to broadband. Mr. Speaker, that's the bill in essence, and I'll accept any questions.
Do you yield for questions?
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes Chairman Lynn Smith to your right for a question.
Thank you and welcome back.
Thank you.
Is it not true that most of today I heard from my EMC personnel in my area and they were not for the bill? So to the gentleman in the well, I pose the question again, are they now in agreement?
We have agreement with the EMC Trade Commission, those that are the umbrella for the EMCs. There is a lot of misinformation out there, and I think we've gotten a lot of calls from some of the individual EMCs, but the Trade Association for the EMCs are all singing Kumbaya. So for what it's worth, thank you.
Thank you. Let's hope they receive that via the internet when the time comes.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you further yield?
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes the Majority Leader of the House, Leader Burns, for a question.
I do.
Mr. Chairman, is it not true that you and I have worked several hours in the last couple of weeks, and I say that as a small several, but a lot of several hours, many hours, on trying to come up with a solution that serves all of the different partners, the complex partners in this whole situation, to find something that's fair and equitable to each and every one of them. Is that not true?
It is, sir.
And there's been many suggestions and many plans put on the table, and this seems to be the one that's got the most traction with all parties concerned, whether it's the cable companies, the EMCs, the rural telephone companies, all concerned. Is that not true?
It is true.
And did you not say that even though we may not have heard from the individual associations, EMCs across this state, that the Georgia EMC Trade Association is okay with this bill? Is that not true?
Yes, sir, that's true.
Lastly, to the gentleman in the well, if you yield for one more question.
Yes, sir.
Has it not been the work of this General Assembly, and especially this House, to find a way, a pathway, if you will, to deploy broadband across this state in underserved and unserved areas of Georgia. Is that not true?
Yes, sir, it is.
And is it this, you have one more question.
Yes, sir.
Is it not true that this agreement that you've reached, this compromise, if you will, is the best alternative we have to making sure that all Georgians are served by adequate broadband coverage in this state? Is that
Yes,
not true?
That is true, and I appreciate the question. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to yield the well. Last year, I want to thank the body for helping us take the first of two steps that we needed with Senate Bill 2 to get the EMCs into the business. Let's take the other step today and honor Jay Powell. I'll yield the well.
Chair recognizes Chairman Don Parsons to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Speaker Ralston. I appreciate the opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I come up here to speak on this bill, and I'm going to vote against the bill. And I'm going to vote against it for a few reasons I'm going to tell you about, and I'll try to do it briefly. First of all, although it's been many, many years, I've climbed poles. I don't know how many people here have, but I did for a number of years. I started working for Chesapeake and Potomac Telephone Company in 1966, and I climbed poles every day, many poles a day, for a long time. And I know what it's like to go up a pole when you have attachments on there. It's not quite as simple as it might seem. When you have attachments that you have to climb around, it presents problems. It presents more problems when you're above the attachments and you skin down the pole, I can tell you that. Now, I haven't climbed them for a long time, and I would say today probably a lot more times bucket trucks are used than climbing. I don't see many people climb them anymore, but the issue is still the same. When you have attachments there, it still is a problem, and there's reasons that different companies want to charge, different prices for their poles and different prices in different places. But I have no sides on this thing. I'm not taking sides with the EMCs or the cable telephone companies. That's not the issue. I want you to look, or if you had the bill, here's what the bill says on line 31. In order to promote the deployment of broadband services in this state, on and after July 1st, 2021, the rates, fees, terms, conditions, and specifications in any pole attachment agreement entered into by a communications service provider and an electric membership corporation shall be determined by the Commission. That's regulation by the PSC. The PSC does not regulate broadband. They have not regulated broadband, and this is be a whole nother venture for them to get into. Down on line 42, the Commission shall have jurisdiction over all electric membership corporations to enforce compliance with provisions of this code section. Public Service Commission doesn't regulate the EMCs. Another encroachment into an area that they're not in today. Now, as far as the PSCs, the first thing that they're going to want are more people and more money to do that. They don't do that. They don't regulate broadband. Now, this whole discussion about pole attachment predates the internet. It predates broadband. This discussion and the arguments between the different providers and the EMCs goes back many, many years. And this is just to throw broadband in here, it's just throwing something into it that hasn't been in the equation until a couple of years ago. As far as promoting and advancing broadband deployment anywhere, I mean, this isn't going to do it. We just passed the bill last year that was mentioned that allowed the EMCs into this market. And that was supposed to be, the thing was really going to get broadband in rural Georgia. And now you're doing something that actually makes it harder for them to do it, because they're going to be able to charge a lower price to other people in the industry trying to put in broadband. They're going to have to charge by agreement that is actually adjudicated by the PSC a lower price. I mean, it makes no sense to me. We just got them into it. Now you're going to say they can't, they have to enter into an agreement with a cable telephone company to charge a lower price than they do now. Now, one more thing, or a couple more things, and I'll get down. I know it's getting late. About 3 or 4 years ago, I read that one of the FCC commissioners, I.G. Pye, had made a speech about rural broadband. He's a great proponent for it. He's the greatest proponent at the federal level for rural broadband that there is in this country. I can tell you that. I went up and met with him. I got a meeting with him because I was excited about it, and I wanted to talk to him about what we could do in the state of Georgia. And I think he gave me 15 minutes, and I was in there for at least a half an hour. I wouldn't leave. And he told me that, among other things, of course, money is an issue. He said, but I'm trying to get Congress to provide us some money and trying to get them to do that through the sale of spectrum. Well, now after about 4 or 5 years, that's actually happened. The spectrum is being auctioned off. This year, the FCC will have $20.5 billion nationwide. I think in Georgia, it's already been set that Georgia will have 187,000 locations that money's going to. This is money from the PSC. Now, I say that to say that I.G. Pye, who is now the chairman of the FCC, is a great proponent of broadband and rural broadband. This is what he just said recently. He said a uniform, and he's changed his mind on this. He thought at one time he was a proponent for deregulation at federal level and more regulation at state level. Recently, he said a uniform, well-established set of regulations is preferable at the federal level than the states regulating broadband individually. And that's exactly what this is. This is allowing the PSC to enter into something they have not done before. They're going to be regulating your EMCs, something they haven't done before. They're going to be regulating, to a certain extent, cable television, which they haven't done before. Now, if you're against regulation, then you should be against the Public Service Commission, which is a body made to regulate, getting into an area that they have not even been in before. I would urge you, I'm going to vote against it. I want to make sure that there's at least one vote against it when it goes over to the Senate. But I don't think that this is the right solution. I think it does some things in here that that will actually make it harder to provide broadband in rural Georgia. And this is something that I have been interested in and I've worked hard on for the last several years. And this is not, think about it. If you would just think about what this bill does and what I've just explained, I think you'd have to agree this does nothing to promote rural broadband. And I would ask you to vote against it, but you vote your conscience. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield the will.
Gentleman has yielded the will. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to withdrawing the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is withdrawn. Is there any objection to adopting the substitute offered by the Committee on Rules? The chair hears none. The Rules Committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of House Bill 244 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. What purpose does Representative Anulowitz rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that this bill is not about regulating rural broadband, but is rather a critical step towards determining a process that sets a fair process and conditions for EMC pole attachments to take place, which will encourage more rural broadband development?
I am sure the lady believes that to be true. What purpose does Representative Holland rise?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Rule 133, I ask to please be excused from this.
The lady has that right. What purpose does Representative Lopez Romero rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Speaker, is it not true that Georgia Power netted in 2019 $1.7 billion in net income and now is asking for the PSC to be able to set lower rates for their use of the poles when in fact the ENC has offered their poles free of use to expand precisely into rural areas?
If the lady so states, I'm sure that she has read that information somewhere. What purpose does the majority leader of the House rise?
Parliamentary
State your inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, is it not true that this has nothing to do with Georgia Power?
That was sort of what I thought, but the hour is late. For what purpose does Chairman England rise?
Inquiry, Mr.
State
Speaker.
your inquiry.
Is it not true that Georgia Power's pole attachment rates are set by the FCC?
That's my understanding. What purpose does Chairman Knight rise?
To reiterate, that isn't it true that Georgia
Is
Power
this a
has
parliamentary inquiry?
parliamentary inquiry?
State
Isn't
your
it true
inquiry.
that, again, Georgia Power has nothing to do with this bill?
I think we've established that. What purpose does Representative Jasmine Clark rise?
Parliamentary
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that I've heard from both the cable companies and the EMCs and that they went to the table and compromised to come up with this committee substitute?
Well, I think the author of the bill has described the negotiation process accurately. What purpose does Representative Frazier rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it not true, Mr. Speaker, that I represent rural Georgia, Burke County, and this is exactly what I need to expand broadband?
If the lady so states, I know that she believes that to be true. Have all members now voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of House Bill 244. The ayes are 116, the nays are 44. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 1035.
House Bill 1035 by Representative Martin of the 49th to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 8 of Title 4080 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to sales and use taxes so as to repeal sunset provisions regarding certain tax exemptions. This bill having referred to the Committee on Ways and Means, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Chairman Martin to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, the hour is late. House Bill 1035 seeks to remove the sunset on a few areas that the Department of Revenue recommended we do. These are nonprofit health centers on page 1, nonprofit volunteer clinics, qualified food banks, qualified nonprofits that use food and ingredients for disaster relief, and further food ingredients for disaster relief. It also extends on the back page, page 3, 2 items for non-print intangible products that are used by nonprofits, and cement mixers. Most everything is related to nonprofit except Section 2, so to be clear about that, that is extending the exemption for sales tax for equipment. These are the cement mixers. Arguably, they fit into integrated plant theory of a manufacturer. Mr. Speaker, these simplify this. It was recommended by the Department of Revenue so that we don't have to do these every 3 or 4 years. Sometimes when we send these bills over trying to extend these periods, our friends in the Senate use them as vehicles to do some mischief. So if we could do this, we could help some folks that are trying to help Georgians. And with that, Mr. Speaker, if there are no questions, I ask for the favorable consideration, and I'll yield the well.
You do not have any questions. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the passage of House Bill 1035, the ayes are 156, the nays are 1. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 736.
House Bill 736 by Representative Bilton of the 112th be entitled an act to amend Article 7 of Chapter 3, entitled 20 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to scholarships, loans, and grants for post-secondary education. This bill I refer to the Committee on Higher Education. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Chairman Belton to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, you have the best education record in all of Georgia history, and I appreciate that. I left a sheet on your desk about the Teacher Vacancy Tax Credit Program. This idea was actually formulated long ago by Chairman Amy Carter, the Education Reform Commission in 2016. It's a laser-focused, pinpoint way to address the rural children and the children in the turnaround schools. 46 states do something like this. 43 studies have said that it works. We've had 3,112 children were not teachers were not filled last year, and I'm asking you to pass this bill. I ask for questions.
You have a question if you yield.
I will yield.
Chair recognizes Chairman Dickey to your right for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
I will yield.
Is it not true that this bill will help supply teachers to rural and underserved areas that have a real shortage now, attracting those type teachers?
That's exactly right, sir. Thank you for the question.
Good bill.
I yield the well, sir.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. What purpose does Representative Stovall rise?
Parliamentary.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that I'm a co-signer on this bill, and I really appreciate Representative Belton for presenting this bill for our turnaround schools?
If the lady so states. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of House Bill 736. The ayes are 158, the nays are 2. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Resolution 18.
House Resolution 18 by Representative Hughley of the 136th and others, compensating Mr. J. Keith Bendre Robinson Sr. and for other purposes. This resolution having been assigned to the Committee on Judiciary. That committee recommends that this resolution be adopted by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Representative Hughley to present the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I bring to your attention House Resolution 18 on behalf of Mr. Jakeith Robinson, who seeks compensation from this body as a result of wrongful incarceration in the amount of $560,000. We depend on our justice system to keep us safe, and it protects our families and our homes and our businesses and our communities. In the pursuit of fairness, the justice system is governed by rules of procedure to protect us as citizens so that each of us is treated fairly in the judicial arena. When the rules are not followed, we all lose. Jakeith Robinson spent 20 years behind bars for a crime he did not commit because the state of Georgia and its agents did not follow our judicial procedure. In June of 1998, Robinson was accused of being a driver of a getaway car in an armed robbery of an armored car driver. He was indicted along with 2 other men and tried for malice murder, felony murder, armed robbery, 2 counts of aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. Mr. Robinson was tried separately as the state of Georgia was seeking the death penalty on the other 2 defendants. In his trial, there was no evidence presented against him to suggest that he was at the scene of the crime, and there was no witnesses against him. He was tried under the theory of being a party to the crime. At the end of the first trial, Mr. Robinson was found not guilty of malice murder, not guilty of felony murder, not guilty of both aggravated assault charges, but the jury could not reach a verdict. They were deadlocked on the charges of armed robbery and possession of a firearm. In September of 1999, the DA decided to retry Mr. Robinson, but at this time they joined his case with one of the others involved. And at the second trial, he made a motion to sever his case from the other case, but the judge denied his request but granted him an interlocutory appeal to the Georgia Court of Appeals. This was a case of double jeopardy, as the same arguments to the party of a crime theory were used in the second trial. However, his defense was barred from telling the jury that he had been acquitted under this theory in the first trial. At the conclusion of the second trial, he was found guilty of armed robbery, but he was acquitted of possession of a firearm. He was sentenced to life in prison. In 2001, Robinson filed his notice of appeal. And 3 years later, in August 2004, a hearing on Mr. Robinson's motion to amend his sentence, the trial transcripts had been completed, but the appeal had not been docketed. When the Court of Appeals reviewed this case, it said, staggeringly, 10.5 additional years elapsed before the record was docketed with this court, and no explanation for the extreme delay appears in the record. We take yet another opportunity to remind the bench and bar that this sort of extraordinary post-conviction pre-appeal delay puts at risk the rights of defendants and crime victims and the validity of convictions obtained after a full trial. The court goes on to say that it's the duty of all those involved in the criminal justice system, including the trial courts and prosecutors, as well as the defense counsel and defendants, to ensure that appropriate post-conviction motions are filed, litigated, and decided without unnecessary delay. The court said that, unfortunately, was not fulfilled in this case. We are now faced with an individual who has been in prison for over 15 years for a conviction that, as we explain, must be reversed. The Court of Appeals decided that the trial court was in error in overruling the defendant's objection to the state's attempt to prove armed robbery via a party to a crime theory, because the issue was barred from relitigation under double jeopardy, based on the acquittal of Mr. Robinson under that theory in the first trial, in which the jury determined that Robinson was not a party to the crimes. So the Court of Appeals reversed the judgment. So Mr. Robinson went to jail at age 23, and he did not return to his family until he was 43. I know this is hard to imagine, but I must ask the question, what would you do if this happened to you or to your child? So here we have Mr. Robinson 20 years later, and he's seeking to put back the remnants of a broken life. And this compensation resolution will help him to do that. For we can't give him back his youth. We cannot give him back the lost time with his children. We can't give him the opportunity to grieve with his family by attending his father's funeral, as his father died and he was not allowed to go to the funeral while he was in prison. But we can give him hope and a chance to build a future. This General Assembly can do what my mother always taught me to do. When you make a mistake, be big enough to own it and say, I'm sorry. So I ask us tonight that even though I know there are some in here who feel that we should never do these types of resolutions, and I know there's some who's looking for who's to blame, but I tell you tonight that everyone involved in this case were working as agents of the state of Georgia. That is us. This man's information was lost in the shuffle, and there is no reason why 10 years passed and he was not given a chance for his appeal to be heard. I'm going to close with this because I received a floral arrangement the other day and it had Micah 6 and 8 stamped on the front of it. So let me simply ask each of you to remember what that scripture challenges us to do as we make our decisions today. He has showed thee, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of thee but to do justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with thy God? That is what H.R. 18 on behalf of Jakeith Robinson asks each of us to do today. And I ask you to vote yes. If there are no questions, Mr. Speaker, I'll
There are no questions. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? Chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this resolution now be adopted? All those in favor of the adoption of the resolution will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the adoption of House Resolution 18. The ayes are 128, the nays are 26. This resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Chair Clerk will read the caption to House Resolution 1038.
House Resolution 1038 by Representative Gordon of the 163rd, a resolution compensating Kenneth Eric Gardiner and for other purposes. This resolution having been referred to the Committee on Appropriations, that committee recommends that this resolution be adopted by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Representative Gordon to present the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members of this body. I come here today in solidarity to bring forth a compensation resolution for Army soldier Kenneth Gardner. Kenneth and two of his friends on the night of January 31st, 1992, was wrongfully arrested. After that, prosecuted and did 25 years for a crime that he did not commit. Ultimately, his sentence was predicated on pressure from a ADA who was a ward of the state, along with evidence that was not given to his defense. Mr. Gardner's compensation is $1 million, broken up into a $150,000 payment, and the rest an annuity of going in 20 years.
You have no questions. I'm sorry, you do have a question. Do you yield?
I do.
Chair recognizes Representative Ridley to your right for a question.
Gentleman, yield.
I do.
I'm kind of familiar with this one and the other two, and it's a bad deal. I mean, it really is. There ain't no way to really explain the heartfelt I got for these guys. But is it not true that the DA withheld evidence during this trial that found these guys guilty?
The gentleman knows what he speaks.
Is it also not true that the DA is elected by the city who they serve?
The gentleman knows what he speaks.
And the judge that did this was also elected. Is that not also true?
That is also true, but they both are extensions of the state.
Okay, that's what I was wanting to understand, how the state was involved in this, if it's an elected official that tries these and don't do the job. But that's what I was wanting to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you further yield?
I do, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Chairman Houston to your right for a question.
Isn't it true that the DA is a constitutional officer and he is paid partly by the state? And if you'll notice the other day, when you were signing up for re-election, you probably saw your DA at the same place you were. And so isn't it also true, if people got a Bible when they came here, and if they were to go to Hebrews 13, Hebrews 13, the third verse, they would take a yes vote.
I think the gentle lady.
Go back and look at it and read it when you get in your room. Thank you.
Thank you.
Y'all heard her.
Okay. I yield the well.
Gentleman yields the well. Chair recognizes Representative Al Williams to speak to the resolution.
Very quickly, and I know parliamentarily we will consider the three separately. In 1992, there was a young man by the name of Ricky Gibbons that had completely terrorized the city of Savannah. Some 19 murders were attributed to him. These three young GIs did not know Savannah, showed up at the wrong place at the wrong time, and were beat up in jail because the guys in jail thought they were white supremacists. These were three military guys from Texas, country boys. Wrong place, wrong time. This gave 25 years of their life. And I think it's small compensation. Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Gentleman yields the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this resolution now be adopted? All those in favor of the adoption of the resolution will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. What purpose does Representative Gilliard rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true, Representative Gordon, that there was a young man that helped protest, march, believed that these men were innocent when Stanley Jackson was a man of color and they were not of color?
You can't address Representative Gordon.
I just wanted to commend the gentleman on the excellent resolution.
Okay.
Thank you.
What purpose does Representative Kennard rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true that in our criminal justice system you are treated better if you are rich and guilty than if you are poor and innocent?
Well, I'm sure that is the gentleman's opinion. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the adoption of House Resolution 1038, the ayes are 131, the nays are 25. This resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. The clerk will read the caption to House Resolution 1039.
House Resolution 1039 by Representative Gordon of the 163rd, a resolution compensating Dominic Brian Lucci and for other purposes. This resolution was referred to the Committee on Appropriations. That committee recommends that this resolution be adopted by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Representative Gordon to present the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the essence of time, Dominique Lucci was a friend of Kenneth Gardner, the last resolution that we just voted on, and he was a part of the three that just unfortunately were incarcerated for 25 years. So again, in the essence of time, I will not go into depth on the incident again, but if anybody has any questions, I'll yield.
You have no questions?
Thank you.
Gentleman yields the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this resolution now be adopted? All those in favor of the adoption of the resolution will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the adoption of House Resolution 1039, the ayes are 134, the nays are 23. This resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Clerk will read the caption to House Resolution 1041.
House Resolution 1041 by Representative Gordon of the 163rd, a resolution compensating Mark Jason Jones and for other purposes. This resolution was referred to the Committee on Appropriations. That committee recommended that this resolution be adopted by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Representative Gordon to present the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I know y'all are getting tired of me. Last resolution for Mr. Mark Jason Jones. He was the last of the 3 soldiers who got arrested and gave 25 years of his life for a crime that he didn't commit. I'd just like to thank all committees that gave these 3 resolutions due process. The family of Stanley Jackson, who was the actual victim, who was also a veteran and Desert Storm soldier himself. And I ask for your favorable consideration. I'll yield for questions.
You have no questions.
Thank you.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this resolution now be adopted? All those in favor of the adoption of the resolution will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the adoption of House Resolution 1041. The ayes are 133, the nays are 22. This resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 86. House Bill 86.
House Bill 86 by Representative Benton of the 31st to be entitled an act to amend Part 11 of Article 17 of Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to complaints, policy for teachers, and other school personnel. This bill then referred to the Committee on Education. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Chairman Benton to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 86 is a bill that would provide for an evaluation process for tenured teachers who receive unsatisfactory on the year-end evaluation. It is a simple review process for those tenured teachers. Teaching is one of the only few professions that cannot request a review of a performance evaluation. And teaching has become an occupation that has one of the highest turnover rates as more educators realize they have limited or no rights for input in classroom discipline, evaluation, review, and other critical factors. This is a mechanism to enhance the professional side of teaching and education in general. Many educators, both leaving and remaining in the profession, complain of the current rigid law regarding evaluations. This has been witnessed by the Department of Education as well as local systems, associations, and education establishments. I hope that you will give this bill a good evaluation and give all green for the teachers of Georgia. Mr. Speaker, that's the bill. If no question,
You have no questions. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of House Bill 86 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of House Bill 86. The ayes are 155, the nays are 2. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 1050.
House Bill 1050 by Representative Lumsden of the 12th, being entitled an act to amend Chapter 38 and Title 33 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated, relating to Georgia Life and Health Insurance Guarantee Association, so as to extend association protections to certain persons. This bill having been referred to the Committee on Insurance, that committee recommends that this bill do pass.
Chair recognizes Chairman Lumsden to present the bill.
Mr. Speaker, members of the House, I bring to you House Bill 1050, a Department of Insurance bill that comes as a priority for the Georgia Insurance Commissioner's Office. This is model legislation that comes from the National Association of Insurance Commissioners and has been passed in 28 states over the past 2 years. It's an insurance industry approach to deal with the problem of insolvencies by companies that have sold long-term care policies in our state. Many long-term care policies have been sold in Georgia over the past 3 decades. Many of the actuarial assumptions that these policies were based on have proven to be inaccurate, and as a result, we will have more insurers becoming insolvent in the next decade. Each state has a mechanism in place funded by all admitted insurers operating in their state to deal with this problem. The Life and Health Guarantee Fund is the mechanism in Georgia. It steps in and provides coverage to policyholders of companies that have become insolvent. As is the case with any fund of this type, the more participants that you have paying into the fund, the less impact it has on each member and ultimately on each policyholder. House Bill 1050 does 2 things. It adds health maintenance organizations to the fund to broaden the assessment base, and by agreement it splits the assessments equally between life member insurers and health member insurers. HMOs were not previously part of the fund, but because of the changes in the marketplace, HMOs are now asking to be a part. All of the HMOs in Georgia, with the exception of one, are in favor of becoming a part of the guarantee fund, and it will provide protection to all HMO policyholders who currently do not have such coverage. This is an industry-wide solution and requires participation by all like insurers. Any exception would create an unfair competitive advantage for any company that's not included. As I said, this is a NAIC model legislation. It addresses a problem that's really all over the country, and the guarantee fund is the mechanism that we use to deal with that in this state. And that's the bill, and I would appreciate your favorable consideration.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of House Bill 1050. The ayes are 155, the nays are 4. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 336.
House Bill 336 by Representative Blackman of the 146th to be entitled an act to amend Article 7, Chapter 3, Title 47 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated, relating to retirement allowances, disability benefits, and spouses benefits. This bill having referred to the Committee on Retirement. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Recognizes Chairman Blackman to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Fellow members, bring before you House Bill 336, which would permit classroom teachers to return to work full-time in subject areas of high need. It's intended to help address shortages across our systems in this state. The estimated impact on TRS is zero. There are a number of provisions to ensure as much. There's a sunset 12-month waiting period. It's limited to the 3 highest need areas by RISA, and the full amount has to be contributed back into TRS with no future liability. I be happy to answer any questions. If there are none, I'd ask for favorable consideration. Mr. Speaker?
You have no questions.
Thank you. Yield the well.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of House Bill 336 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of House Bill 336. The ayes are 161, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 452.
House Bill 452 by Representative Saints, the 180th to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 11 of Title 19, the official code of Georgia annotated relating to the enforcement of duty of support. This bill having referred to the Committee on Judiciary. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Representative Sains to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Romans 13:6 says, pay your taxes to they're ministers of God. In that effect, this creates a bank match system that will collect $3 million a year projected by DOR without increasing the taxable authority of that department. Does the same thing in how we collect indigent child support payments. And with that, I understand Representative Beasley Tees to be tired, and I'll yield for questions. I won't yield for questions.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. What purpose does Representative Cannon rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that someone could be delinquent on their child support for a number of reasons? Perhaps they simply do not have the money, and by allowing for banks to go ahead and automatically work with this, that could hurt some Georgians?
If the lady believes that to be true, I'm sure that that's a sincere belief on her part. What purpose does Representative Sains rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that this bill has nothing to do with child support payment collection? It is related to delinquent taxpayer collection that has already been adjudicated, gives the Department of Revenue no taxable authority that they do not already have, just an efficiency in collection.
As the author of the bill, I'm sure the gentleman knows whereof he speaks. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of House Bill 452. The ayes are 115, the nays are 42. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 994.
House Bill 994 by Representative Reeves of the 34th being titled an act to revise provisions to advance the enforcement of laws and responses to certain criminal activities. This bill having referred to the Committee on Judiciary Non-Civil, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Representative Reeves to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I bring you House Bill 994. It is a little update to the Criminal Street Gang Act. I worked with the GBI on this bill. As a lot of you are aware, when GBI Director Vic Reynolds became director of the GBI, he pledged to devote more resources than Georgia's ever seen and more effort to crack down on our violent street gangs and try to end these gangs that are plaguing our communities. Part of what he intended to do or intends to do is not just to strengthen how the GBI prosecutes gangs, but also to assist other jurisdictions. Worked with the GBI on this legislation. This is a part of the law I'm familiar with. 4 years ago, I helped rewrite the Criminal Street Gang Act, and this body passed that. This bill refines several issues and pieces of the Gang Act, a lot of which is based on actual cases that we've seen come up in Georgia. What this bill is not, this is very important, the bill started in one fashion and it is presented to you today in a different way than it began. It does not include any provisions about the death penalty or criminal street gang murder being an aggravating factor to be considered for the death penalty. It also does not contain the provisions previously in the bill that would allow the district attorney to be able to bring a juvenile straight into Superior Court for criminal street gang conduct. It also has removed the cross-circuit and county jurisdictional language. The district attorneys didn't care for that language, and decision was made that we wanted their support on this, and so that part of the bill was removed too. And this bill also contains no mandatory minimums that require prison time. Every single thing in this bill that is presented that is new law, sentencing-wise, can be probated. What the bill is it does add serious offenses to the criminal street gang activity list, including human trafficking, aggravated child molestation, and others. This bill requires, this is important, it requires the Department of Juvenile Justice develop gang intervention programs for juveniles who are adjudicated in gang cases. It also rolls over from the RICO Act certain civil injunction options that courts currently have and allows us to apply for gang acts or for gang violations. And it also adds certain offenses to the sex offender registry, including serious sexual crimes committed by gang members as a part of street gang activity. The bill has changed significantly. My understanding is that there is a minority report, and so in light of the hour and in light of the fact that there is a minority report, I'm going to go ahead and yield for that.
Gentleman has yielded the well. We have members that wish to speak. The chair recognizes Representative Bennett to speak to the bill. Waves. Chair recognizes Representative McLaurin to speak to the bill. He waves. Chair recognizes Representative Derek Jackson to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know the hour is late. I know you're tired and exhausted. I know you're ready to go home, but we still have some work to do. You know, House Bill 994 sort of takes us back. This body, along with then Governor Deal, was on the right path with our criminal justice reform. In fact, we knew we were on the right path because so many other states started adopting what we were doing in Georgia. But when you think about some of the changes that the chair was talking about, my good friend said they made some adjustments. But if you really go back to 2010, see, since 2010, Georgia anti-gang law is already the harshest gang legislation across the nation. So 994 will just simply grow the government, especially during a time that we can't afford. But what's the real intent of 994? To criminalize public nuisance, like what happens when you're painting graffiti if someone is determined to be a member of a criminal street gang? Or is it simply just to create another public gang registry because that sort of function like sex offender? This drastically increased the number of crimes in which juveniles between the ages of 13 and 17, which would be charged as adults. Longer sentences do not result in increased public safety. It's the same argument that others use with capital punishment. It's just simply a waste of tax dollars. So let's progress. Let's not regress. Let's resume Governor Deal's criminal justice reform and make Georgia what it should be. Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Chair recognizes Representative McLaurin to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been given 60 seconds. Here's the deal. There's a difference between creating categories of new crimes and giving prosecutors resources. What they need is resources to prosecute crimes, and if you ask them what they think about a bill like this, that's what they say. They don't need these new categories. They don't need longer sentences. It sounds tough. The sponsor said that they worked with the GBI on this bill. What he didn't say was, we worked with local DAs, and this came from local DAs, because they don't need this. Local DAs testified this would actually make their job harder. That's real. If I go to lines 181 to 186, they've separated out a crime that used to be an enhancement for maintaining or increasing status in a gang was an enhancement. If you did an act, like a bad act, in order to maintain or increase status, that was one crime. Now it's two. They've split it with two different sentences, maintain or increase. Prosecutors testified that would make their job harder because they'd have to specifically prove that a gang member was trying to only maintain as opposed to increase, or only increase. A gang member doesn't say, well, I'm going to knock over this bank, but I'm only going to do it to maintain status. It'd be kind of crazy to try to increase status. So prosecutors actually expressed concern that this would make it harder to do their jobs. All I'm trying to say is, this is not a bill driven by prosecutorial need. It is a bill that is driven by the need to posture on being tough on gangs. I yield the well. Thank you.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. We have a minority report. By rule, the minority has 20 minutes to deliver their report. The chair recognizes the minority leader, Leader Trammell, for the minority report.
The question that we should ask ourselves with any piece of legislation, but particularly this piece of legislation, is what problem is this trying to solve? You know, gangs are an easy thing to talk about politically. It makes great political television. But what this bill doesn't do is it doesn't give a new tool to prosecutors that they need. During the committee process, we had some testimony on the bill from lawyers who are in court every day prosecuting under the current gang statute. And the reality is that Georgia already has one of the toughest gang laws in the country. And so the question posed to the prosecutors was, how many cases have you been unable to make under the current law against gang members? And you know what the answer is? 0. They're making all the cases they need to make right now under the present law. They don't need a new tool. They didn't ask for a new tool. So all this does is it's an attempt to look tougher. But the consequence of the legislation is, as the Representative McLaurin said, is it allows them to now stack. So they took the statute that you used to be able to charge them, you do a couple of strike-throughs, and instead of charging them with 1 count, you can charge them with 3 counts. But we don't need this law. This law doesn't do anything for the enforcement, but what it does do is it potentially puts people up against more counts. Our time can be better spent in this legislature. We don't need this bill. Mr. Speaker, at this point, I would yield the balance of my time for the minority report to the minority whip, Representative Bodie.
Gentleman has that right. Representative, or the minority caucus whip, Representative Bodie, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I begin my well speech. I want to make it crystal clear that the House Democratic Caucus does not condone gangs, gang activity, or gang violence. With that being said, the Georgia House Democratic Caucus is in complete opposition to HB 994, the Gang Act. The Georgia General Assembly passed this legislation to create a gang statute originally back in 1998. The current Georgia Criminal Street Gang and Terrorism Act is one of the toughest laws in this country. And the Associated Press article from January 27, 2020, the article stated, and I quote, GBI wants to strengthen a state law it already touts as its nation's strongest. Members, I say that we must stay smart on dealing with crime, as we had under the previous administration. When we react to crime with tough on crime legislation, we get the 2 strikes and you're outlaw. We get the military boot camps for youth offenders that were found to be ineffective. We get the federal sentencing guidelines that was passed back in the 90s and destroyed a generation by convicting them to hundreds of years in prison for nonviolent drug offenses. So this leads me to the language of HB 994 itself. In that bill, you will see one of the lines state that with the intent to maintain his or her status or position in a straight gang would be a new crime. Also, with the intent to increase his or her status or position in a street gang would be a new crime. What does that intent really mean? What does intent to maintain your status means? What does intent to increase your status means? Well, I really don't know. I really don't know. And also, when this bill, that HB 994, was in committee, 4 duly elected district attorneys testified, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and stated that this law is not even necessary. During the testimony, the Republican DA stated that the 2 new crimes would even make it more difficult to try gang cases. He further stated that the two new crimes could make their jobs a lot more difficult because they would have to then prove the elements of intent to maintain, intent to increase. The duly elected DAs even stated that Georgia's current gang statute was enough. Again, the Georgia Street Gang and Terrorism Act has strong language and is currently in code. Now, members, why are we creating another gang statute when we already have the toughest statute on gangs in the country? Well, I know my Republican colleagues will probably say, well, Minority Whip, what's the remedy? Well, I got 2 suggestions. How about let's give the locals the adequate resources to deal with gangs? Nobody knows how to deal with gangs than the people that deal with them every day. I want to tell the Republicans in this chamber that gangs are not anything new. We have been dealing with gangs and we have been fighting gangs. But it's time to give the DAs the adequate resources. It's time to give the police officers the adequate resources. But it's also time to give the public defenders the adequate resources to defend these cases. So that brings me to my second point and my second suggestion. Why not provide the community with the resources that we can attack social economic disadvantages? When you have a child that goes to school and they're hungry, when you have a child that goes to school and they have dirty clothes, they are more influenced by the gangs. We have had legislation presented this session that dealt with getting the kids before they even get into gangs. And that's the best way to combat gangs. We have to show the kids that it's another way. We have to provide wraparound services. We have to provide mentor programs. We have to make sure that our kids have the tools to be able to move forward in their lives. I'm proud to say I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, born and raised. I was born in Great Memorial Hospital, right around the corner. I went to Banneker High School. And in my 10th grade year, we had a lot of gang crime, a lot of shootings. But we had a great principal that came in to turn our school around. We had the school board to provide resources where we actually put a little bit of paint on the wall. We upgraded the lockers, and they even gave us a stadium. And that principal held us accountable, and the gang violence started to go away. And we saw a new day. Another reason that I feel that I'm here today is because this General Assembly provided me with the opportunity to go to college. I received a needs-based Hope Scholarship to Valdosta State University. And I was very proud of that. And I didn't know I was going to get the scholarship. But one day my guidance counselor called me into the guidance counselor's office. And she said, William Bodie, you're going to be able to go to college and you don't have to worry about paying for it. So I ask you, me as being a young black man, born right here in Atlanta, to be able to sit in that seat as the number 2 ranking Democrat, because I was given an opportunity, I was given a lane, and that's what we have to do. Let's not just be tough on crime and not be smart on crime. Let's give back, and let's not eradicate 8 years of criminal justice reform where this state was a national model. Other states and even the federal government has emulated the criminal justice reform of the prior administration. So I ask you to vote no to this bill because Georgia already has the toughest gang statute in the United States of America. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Chair recognizes for the chairman's time, Chairman F. Stration.
Mr. Speaker, I'll yield the balance of the chairman's time to Representative Reeves.
Gentleman has that right. Representative Reeves is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. To address a couple of quick issues, the graffiti that was brought up, that's actually current law. I know it's confusing if you look at the bill because there's a whole section on page 5 where everything is underlined, but it's because it's restating the entire list that's on the previous page. The new offenses that are here are in lines 132, 135, and 158. So some of the things that were referenced is actually current law. The district attorneys, their main objection to the bill were the things that were removed from a bill, including the jurisdiction issue, the juvenile issue, and the death penalty issue. That was the crux of their objection. Those issues were all addressed. I want to talk about the minority report real quick. Minority report, it says right here that one of the things that this bill captures non-serious conduct. Well, let's talk about the conduct that the bill brings in to the Criminal Street Gang Act. Line 132, human trafficking. Human trafficking. Line 135 through 138, child molestation, aggravated child molestation, and enticing a child for indecent purposes. Line 158, felony obstruction. This is the new offenses that it brings in, but apparently we're characterizing these as non-serious conduct. It also says that we're not implementing, it says in the minority report, we're not implementing strategies to address the root causes. That is just not true. This bill incorporates, it mandates that the Department of Juvenile Justice develop gang intervention and prevention programs for our juveniles. So it's simply not true. This is find a reason to vote against this bill. Members of this body, I was here for just about every bit of Governor Deal's criminal justice reform. And let me say, we have heard this so many times in the last 2 years. And I was here for just about every single bit of that. I voted for every single bit of it, and I am proud of everything. We changed the game with nonviolent crime. But I challenge you to go look back and tell me where in criminal justice reform we offered the grace and mercy and protection to violent crime that we offered to nonviolent crime. There is a big difference, and we cannot put our heads in the sand on violent criminal street gangs. They are tearing apart our communities. There are communities that live in fear. These are sophisticated gangs, and we have to constantly address our statutes and our ability to combat them. And these communities are living in fear. And so I ask you to vote with me to give some tools to our prosecutors at GBI so they continue to fight criminal street gangs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. We've had a good, thorough debate on this. The hour is late, and we've got a couple of more measures we need to get to, so we're not going to take parliamentary inquiries. All those in favor of the bill are voting aye. Those opposed are voting no. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of House Bill 994. The ayes are 93, the nays are 65. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. What purpose does Representative Cannon rise? She waves. All right. Chair recognizes Chairman Sam Watson for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House agree to the Senate substitute to HB 105 as amended by the House.
Chairman Watson has moved that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 105 as amended by the House. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 105 by Representative Watson and others, to be entitled an act to amend Article 2 of Chapter 7 and Title 48 of the Fiscal Code of Georgia annotated relating to the imposition rate computation and exemptions from state income tax.
Chair recognizes Chairman Watson to explain his motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll try to be brief. This piece of legislation is important to rural Georgia, and it's important to urban Georgia. And what we're doing here, the original piece of legislation passed out of this body almost unanimously last year. It is providing a income tax exemption for the farmers in Southwest Georgia that have been impacted by Hurricane Michael. That, if you remember, on February 27th, there was $347 million in block grant funds that will be coming down from the federal government, and we're just trying to provide a little extra assistance to them. They've been waiting almost 2 years for those funds, and so that's what we're doing in the first part of this bill. The second part of this bill is what's good for urban Georgia, and that's the 50-cent excise tax that we're putting on Uber and Lyft and our ride share individuals that operate across the state. And currently they're not paying any tax, and so April 1 you will have to start paying tax, and so this is a good bill to save money for Georgians, and I just would appreciate your support, and I'll take any questions.
You have a question if you care to yield.
Yes, sir, I'll yield.
Chair recognizes Chairman Tanner to your right for a question.
Will the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir, I will.
Just to clarify, so effective April 1st, with the passage of Marketplace Facilitator in Fulton County, for instance, there will be a 9% sales tax placed on ride shares that's currently not paid by ride share companies. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So with the passage of this legislation, that will replace sales tax with a flat 50-cent fee. And isn't it also true that Uber, Lyft, and the other rideshare companies are in support of this legislation?
Yes, sir, they are. And if we do not pass this, Georgia will be the second highest taxing state in that category.
Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker, I'll yield for another one if you have any.
They're waving off, so
all right. I'll yield the well. And
he
I
has yielded the well. On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 105 as amended by this House. All those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 150, the nays are 7. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 105 as amended by the House. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 1092.
House Bill 1092 by Representative Powell of the 32nd, be entitled an act to amend Code Section 43, 34, 25 of the official code of Georgia annotated relating the delegation of certain medical acts to advanced practiced registered nurse. This bill then referred to the Committee on Regulated Industries. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Chairman Powell to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House. This is a real quick bill. This does just a couple of things. It allows physicians who are using advanced practical licensed nurses, it allows these nurses to do radiological orders. Currently, they can do them in non-life-threatening situations. This would allow them to do these radiological imaging tests under the protocol of that doctor. A lot of the folks that talked to me about this, and it's somehow this thing has been turned upside down for years, tells me what's wrong with the medical profession. These doctors have got complete control over these advanced practical nurses, and if he doesn't want them to do certain things, it's in the protocol. Quite frankly, it's a good bill, and they can do up to 6 or handle up to 6 nurses. Be glad to answer a question, but the Speaker says we're running out of time.
Gentleman had questions, but he yields the will. Chair recognizes the Chairman of the House Ethics Commission, Chairman Nix, to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Real quickly, do y'all know what the most trusted profession in this country is? Nurses, for 19 years in a row. This legislation's been bottled up for years because there's a high-dollar lobby, a couple of them, who did not want you to have a chance to vote on it, and there's several people that are in strategic positions that did not want you to vote on it because it's protecting turf. 49 other states allow this. Georgia is the only state that does not allow these advanced practice nurses to do this. Make no mistake about it, they operate under a physician. It is a team sport. The physician is the quarterback, and they operate under them. They do not do this on their own. Let's be serious about expanding health care in rural Georgia. Let's maximize our resources out there, and let's make a common sense decision. If you vote against this, you're telling our advanced practice nurses that they are inferior to the other nurses in the 49 states around this in this country. So let's vote yes and let them know we appreciate them and that we're not going to let just some small group control health care in this state. I yield the will.
Gentleman has yielded the will. Chair recognizes Representative Clark to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be brief. Colleagues, I come here to speak in favor of House Bill 1092. As an instructor at a school of nursing that knows firsthand the level of rigor and training that advanced practice nurses must go through before practicing as a nurse practitioner, this bill gives doctors the ability to allow advanced practice nurses to order radiographic imaging. It does not force the hand of doctors and instead empowers them to deliver a better patient experience by cutting down on wait times for patients. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the will.
Lady has yielded the will. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. What purpose does Hatchett rise?
Parliamentary
State your inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Isn't it true that there are no patients in this state that are not receiving these images that they need to receive as we practice currently?
Well, I know the gentleman has spent a lot of time working on this issue, so I'm sure he believes that he speaks. Let there be a mic. What purpose does Chairman Cooper rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, is it not true that over the years, when many of the APRNs across this country were granted permission to order these tests, that the test was much simpler? They were things like you could order for a broken arm or a basic MRI. But as technology has advanced in this country, the tests have become so complicated for MRIs and CT scans that even physicians are calling the radiologist to discuss with them which, technically correct procedure that they should order. And there is also, this allows them to order these for children, and there is a big move in this country that these tests should not be ordered for anybody under the age of 18.
I know the lady to be very, very knowledgeable in the field and knows that about which she speaks. All right, we'll do one more parliamentary inquiry, and then we have one more bill to do. Chair recognizes the Dean of the House, Chairman Smythe. He waves. Chair recognizes Chairman Nix he waves. Chair recognizes Representative Cannon.
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that delays in patient care are happening to postpartum moms during our maternal mortality crisis, and this bill will help?
If the lady so states, I'm sure she believes that to be true. All right, we're all in favor of the bill are voting aye. Those opposed are voting no. Have all members voted? All members voted. The chair, if so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of House Bill 1092. The ayes are 114. The nays are 38. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Given the microphone snafu, we're going to get to the final bill of the evening. Chair recognizes, or clerk will read the caption to House Bill 479.
House Bill 479 by Representative Clark of the 147th, being titled an act to provide greater protections for individuals who have suffered from childhood sexual abuse and to amend Code Section 9333.1 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated. This bill had been referred to the Committee on Judiciary. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Chairman Heath Clark to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and because the hour is very late, I'll be very quick. I do want to thank a few people. Representative Anulowitz, Representative Mary Margaret Oliver, Representative Matt Wilson, Representative Burt Reeves, and Chairman Barry Fleming for all their hard work on helping get this bill here. This bill does three things to stand up and give a voice to the victims of child sexual abuse. The first thing it does is for the victims whose trauma was so severe that the memory was suppressed, or later in life, a physician can connect a mental illness or drug abuse or some kind of injury to their childhood trauma. It expands the window from 2 years to 4 years for them to bring charges after the discovery. The second thing is that after July 1st of 2020, it will raise the statute of limitations for a civil action for victims to the victim's age of 38. And the final thing that's had the most discussion is it opens a 1-year window for victims whose statute of limitations has expired to be revived, to file an action against a person who committed the act or an entity, public or private entity, that had a duty of care and they had a volunteer or an employee commit an act of sexual abuse against a child, and the entity had knowledge that it happened, and upon learning of the action, the organization, knowing that it happened, intentionally allowed it to continue, or they worked to actively and intentionally conceal the cover-up or withhold the information. And the important thing here is this is after these entities were mandatory reporters. So not only did the organization intentionally work to cover up the acts of abuse that were in their organization, they were breaking state law by not reporting it. And Mr. Speaker, that is the bill, and I will yield for any questions.
You have a question if you care to yield.
I will yield for one question.
Chair recognizes Representative Holly for a question. He waives.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, I will yield the well and ask for your favorable consideration.
Chair recognizes Representative Anulowicz to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As Representative Clark said, we've got three things. There are three things that we have come to accept and agree on in recent years. We accept and agree that this abuse happened to children in our state. We accept and agree that this abuse was covered up systematically by organizations in this state, and we accept and agree that this childhood sexual abuse has lasting, lifelong, generational effects. Where we've struggled is to come up with a fair and just remedy for these adults who were abused in children. We can recognize the way that these groups have made critical and necessary changes. Y'all, I was a Catholic school mom for 12 years. I'm a Girl Scout leader. I've been on Boy Scout campouts. I've volunteered at Vacation Bible School at my Catholic church. I have done 4 different mandated reporter trainings over the year. I will be the first person to tell you that these groups have made changes, but it is irrefutable that this abuse happened. It is irrefutable that it was covered up, and it is irrefutable that we need to help these adults who were abused as children find justice, and this bill will help us do this. I yield the well.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of House Bill 479. The ayes are 147, the nays are 5. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. In just a moment, we're going to have a motion from the majority leader. We announced earlier today that tomorrow will be session day 29. But chair will be here to make assignments of bills to committees, and we'll do first and second readers. That's the only item of business that we will take up. So I'm encouraging all of you that choose to. I'm just encouraging you. Go home. Go home and be with your families. We've got some challenging days ahead as a state, as a country. May God be with us. Chair recognizes the majority leader of the House for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for your leadership. Mr. Speaker, I move that this House stand adjourned until 11 a.m. Friday, March 13th, 2020.
The majority leader has moved that this House be adjourned until Friday, March 13 at 11 a.m. All those in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. This House will be adjourned until Friday, March 13 at 11 a.m.